We managed to get this program launched because I think it is instructive for how, if you really and truly want to get this integrated into your entire organization, some of the things you're going to have to do. One of the things I learned you had to do is if the 4-star, who's the chief of staff of the Army, didn't want it, it never would have happened. So and even if it wasn't his idea, you have to make them think it's their idea. That's what I learned. And if they have a bad idea, you have to help them see that the good idea really was theirs. And I don't know that that is applicable to anything in your government, but I'm just saying. I'm just saying. Okay, and the other thing you have to do is you have to be able to communicate that high-level guy's great idea is now mandatory for everyone. And so that's where this comes from. This was actually something that George Casey, the Chief of Staff of the Army, wrote on his whiteboard, and that's why I took a picture. So I could then go from the 4-star to all the 3-stars and all the 2-stars and all the 1-star generals and everybody and say, look, he really wants us to do this. So that was really a key thing. Now, I translated that. Obviously, most people can't read it. It says mandatory resilience training up there. And it says all TRADOC, training and doctrine command, all schools. There will be progressive training. All units will do this. It'll begin with battle mind, and there'll be modules updated as we go along. And then the number 2, it says master fitness trainers. That is really the model of the the Penn Resilience Program, where the Penn Resilience Program deploys psychologists, really, to teach teachers, and then the teachers deploy that training to their students. So we use that same model, where you deploy, the psychologists teach our trainers, who are really sergeants and lieutenants and captains, and then they go back and teach these skills to their soldiers. So we use that model. And then there's the self-assessment tool, which is the global assessment tool. So it's a self-assessment tool in that no one sees the actual results of an individual except that individual, but we did make a method, and that's really the important thing, so that you can integrate it with everything else you measure to demonstrate the effectiveness of your training and the outcomes that will be changed. That's key because as Dr. Seligman and everybody else has said, you got to measure it to prove that what you're doing is magic. And I have to say, in the Army, we say it a little bit differently. We say, doers do what checkers check. And so if you're not checking on this stuff, no one will go do it. Okay. And so there we go. So I translated this into that. Those were the specified tasks from Chief of Staff of the Army, that we will mandate deliberate resilience training across the service. We will make master resilience trainers, and they'll have the self-assessment tool, and then we will also have self-development modules that, and you get a sort of a feedback. You get algorithmically derived assessment of you, sort of like the PERMA profile. Only it also comes with suggestions about what you should do, and this, suggestions on what you should do are different based on how you did. Okay, so here's what we needed to develop. We had nothing. Because the Army was like everybody else. The Army focused on illness and pathology and assumed if you didn't have a diagnosis, you were fine. Well, I gotta tell you, we don't do that anywhere else. If you don't have a cast on your leg, we don't assume that you're fine and you're the fastest you can be. So that made no sense. And so instead of continuing to do what we were doing, which was measuring more, instead of having one survey a year, which gave you a list of symptoms, we gave them 4. We gave them the pre-deployment assessment, we gave the post-deployment assessment, we gave the post-post, that was the 3 months after you came back, deployment assessment, but it still was the same thing. It was this laundry list of symptoms instead of looking at strengths. And so if you didn't endorse any symptoms, then the assumption was you must be fine. Well, it wasn't true. Particularly wasn't true because if you endorsed those symptoms, you had to go see somebody as opposed to go home. So you can imagine that a lot of people did not endorse any symptoms. The other thing that's really important, and this there is the STRATCOM plan, a strategic communication plan, and that came right up there with making a getting training, a strategic communication plan, not just for the people who were the victims of what you were planning, but particularly for our political leadership. So the STRATCOM plan was primarily me, going to Capitol Hill and talking to all of the people in both, the Congress and our Senate and our, House of Representatives about, and that were on the, House and Senate Armed Services Committee, about what we were doing and why we were doing it and how I was promising that we would measure it so we could tell that they weren't wasting their money doing this thing. So the other thing that was important was a software application to be able to track this thing. We don't want to be filling out paper questionnaires kind of thing. All right, so a campaign plan. Now, I don't know how the state of Australia, but this is how the Army goes to war. You have a campaign plan. Now, we all know that no plan survives contact with the enemy, but it's also true if you don't have a plan, you have nothing to modify. So there was General Casey's vision, that was the beginning, and then they picked me to do it, and then there's all this other stuff. And so we found a place to do it. We got our mission statement approved. We got our campaign plan. We beta tested the global assessment. First of all, we had to build it, and then so we had a deliberate plan to actually accomplish this stuff. And then you can't just have a plan. You have to have some dates so that your feet are held to the fire to actually do it. And so we did. And it actually went pretty much just as the plan said, which there was great, people were amazed, actually. I wasn't amazed. It's kind of like when somebody said to me as I was getting out of high school, we never thought you'd make it. And I said, well, there's no doubt in my mind. So, the same kind of thing. People were amazed we actually did. I said, well, of course we did. But you have to have a plan. You have to have a plan that incorporates all the elements. And I think you're doing a great job because you're all here. Okay, so, all right, so the global assessment tool itself. We did not want a list of symptoms. We wanted a list of strengths in all the domains of psychological health. So for us, very much like PERMA, and you can map all of these questions probably to PERMA. But we went to the World Health Organization because I didn't want to be accused of Cornum making it up. So I went and I found, okay, they have this model of health, and it includes the social, family, emotional, and spiritual strengths. It also includes physical. But in soldiers, we already did physical. We did a physical training test evaluation twice a year. Everybody got a physical every year. I mean, we had the physical thing pretty much down. We knew exactly how much money we spent on healthcare for every single soldier every single year. So we didn't need to develop anything at that point for the physical. We had that. We have lots of that. So. But we didn't have anything for their psychological health. We had lots for their psychological unhealth, but we had nothing looking at the strengths. So these are the scales that, so I got together a group of experts. I got some civilian experts, I got some military experts, I got them all the services, I got psychologists, I got a couple chaplains, I got some just line leaders, infantry kind of guys who, we don't care about that, Rhonda. Okay, so we got this whole group of guys, and I said, you can come out of that room when you give me an assessment tool that we can deploy. And until then, you're stuck. And I realize you can't do it that way. That is an advantage of being there. I can tell people to do stuff, But what I also learned is you can tell them to do it, but you still have to convince them or they still won't do it. And we started off, and once again, those are all the various scales we used from, but there's only about 4 questions that weren't already on a validated scale. So we ended up with 270 questions. It took forever to do this thing. We gave that to the first 20,000 people. And then I hired some of those really smart analysts, and I said, okay, winnow this thing down to 100 questions, which they did, magically. And in fact, this factor analysis, which I don't understand, but they did it, shows that we really only needed 87 of those questions to be just as accurate. I said, well, leave those other questions in. I want some slush questions, so if we find something else we need, we can just stop using those and put these in. Understand, this is not a research project. That was not the intent. Our methodology probably wasn't rigorous enough to be published in a randomized controlled trial journal kind of thing. And if we had tried to do it that way, we would still be waiting. So the idea was to make it scientifically valid. So I didn't call it research. I think it's really important. We called it data-driven decision-making. And personally, I think that's how every decision ought to be made, as opposed to I think something will work and go do it. No, that's a terrible thing to do. So particularly when you're using the taxpayers' money to do it. I am a taxpayer. I don't want some, well, we used to call them GOGIs, General Officer Good Ideas. You know, we don't want you to do that. We really don't. We want to prove it's a good idea. So that's those are the things we measure. And so it's not just, now, surely, if you have a pile of symptoms, you probably don't do very well in this. That's true. But what it does do is that it gives people who are doing well an opportunity to see they're doing well, and an opportunity to see, I'm doing well, but I still could do better. And that's really what soldiers want. The vast majority of soldiers are well. They want to be even better. They take that very seriously. Okay, so here's I think I just said all this. Now, the important thing is the GAT will only, it's really transparent. You can see what would be socially desirable. I mean, there's no, it's not cosmic. It's really easy to see that. So if they thought, we did a very big strategic campaign on, no one will see your results but you. No one, not your commander, not your mother, not the chaplain, not the doctor, not anybody will see your results except you. And you get the feedback, and you can either choose to blow it off or you can choose to act on it, but only you will get it. And we did show that about 87 to 90% of people actually do take it quite seriously. And between there and there, 2.7 million times it was done, about once every 30 seconds. And I'm going to show you at the end how many people do it every year. Active duty soldiers, that doesn't include all the family members. Some people in the Air Force do it. There's a lot of people who are doing it. But so when we can mandate that you take it, just like I can mandate you take a PT test, I can mandate you take this thing. So the other thing we did simultaneously with sort of developing the questions was a software application so we could do something with the answers and grade it. So here's what happened originally, and this did expand to a huge thing not too long after we started this. But so okay, either the soldier or his spouse takes the thing and it feeds into this software application and they immediately get something back. And what they get back is their scores on all the domains, and then a little narrative paragraph about what that means, that you're good in engagement, but you're not so good in something else, and what that means. And at the same time, this fitness tracker then strips away their name and social security number. But it leaves in all the demographic information, how many days they've been, and it then is integrated with these other, start off with just these other databases, which are in small letters: Integrated Total Army Personnel Database, the Defense Manpower Data Center, the Digital Training Management. I mean, it's a whole pile of things. And then, so you could see, without knowing who it was, you could see, for example, the effect of age on answers, the effect of numbers of days of deployment, how recent it was the rank, it was the education, all those sorts of things, how they did on their PT test scores, what other courses they had taken. So it all sort of fit into this thing. And then, and so the reason we did that was so that leaders could decide, what they should be training, and the big Army could decide how effective what they were doing was. Now, that thing really expanded, and it's now the person, event, data, environment, and then there's all these things. And this is just for the Army. There's a whole pile of things for other services in this big server farm out in California. But it really does the same thing. It really integrates all the databases that we have with the GAT scores, and so that if they've had training, for example, and there's GAT, and once we do it every year, and these things feed in, I think they're refreshed every 48 hours or something. So it's a great way to look at the effect of what you're doing on outcomes you care about, because I'm sure the Army really does care about your psychological health, but what it really cares about is how effective you are in mission accomplishment, and that sort of thing. That's just, it is a complex thing, which I'm glad they have, and I'm glad I don't have to do it. That's what it's telling you. Okay, so this was the first about 800,000 people we did, and of the global assessment tool, and what you'll see is that men and women were about the same. about 15% of our service is female, but so obviously females were overrepresented. But it does show that that they're pretty similar, and in fact they were almost identical in probably everything, if I recall, except organizational trust. Our female soldiers were a little lower on organizational trust. But what you can see is there are a wide spectrum of people in the Army, and this does not include anybody who's in a hospital. So this is just people who are actually serving on active duty at that point, and so and the scores on all these questions, I find when something bad happens, I think something it will rapidly improve. Do you endorse that? Not at all, or to a lot, from 0 to 5, and you can see there's a lot of people who endorse that something bad is going to keep happening, kind of thing. So the lower you are, the worse off you are. And so men and women are very similar, and there's a wide spectrum of people strengths and lack of strengths in our, and I won't say it's a sample because it's everybody. What you will see here, and this is, I had lots of commanders. They wanted the commanders, when we had told them they're not going to get the results of their units, and there was a lot of angst about that. It's just kind of like you probably would have that with teachers. I want to see how my class is doing. Well, here's what we found. Although there's a wide spectrum of individuals, we did first a division. A division's about 10,000 people. And it has in it brigades, and they're 2,500 to 3,000 people. So there's the division mean and standard deviation, and there's each of the brigades, or the brigade combat teams, and as you can see, they're all the same. So if we gave a roll-up to each individual commander, it would make no difference. They would see that every unit is the same. And then we took one of these, we took Brigade Combat Team 3, and I broke it down into the 6 battalions. And again, the same story. They're the same. So giving that commander that information would not help him at all. He would see that his unit was just like everybody else's. And it would give less confidence to the individual soldiers that their anonymity was protected. So we don't give that to the commanders because it wouldn't help them. And we've done this now, and I did the same analysis with all the different, so we did it like the hospital versus the infantry unit, and we did, guys and girls, and we did people deployed versus, in Germany versus in, Korea versus in America. I mean, we did this sort of, and people are the same everywhere. There's a wide spectrum of strength in every organization. I mean, I suppose if you got down to, every group, every platoon, you might find something different, but in large organizations, people are the same. But how you score on the global assessment tool has a huge impact, or at least is hugely related to how you do in the service. So one of the things that I thought was really valuable that we did was I got them to deliver the assessment tool within the first 2 days of arriving in the Army. And so this is their GAT score by percentile, and by the bottom 10% up to the 100%. And you can see attrition rate. The people who drop out of basic training, and it's only 9 weeks, is hugely different. So if you're in the bottom 10%, 8.9% drop out, whereas if you're in the upper 50%, it's only 1.5 to 3%. Now, that's hugely important if you are if you're a recruiter, because we spend about $88,000 getting any one guy in. And when you bring in 130,000 people a year, that's real money. So doing something about this would be really helpful. And this is just that bottom 30% by 2% increments. So you can see, once again, if you're at the really bottom, you're really at high risk. So that kind of data helps you convince the hierarchy that, sir, we ought to do something to increase people's psychological fitness, and it would save us a lot of money. The post-deployment health analysis, the percentage of people that experienced one or more somethings. Now this line, this almost flat line, that is the people who experienced a traumatic event, like an incoming round that blew up, or you were in an IED, or you were in, somebody shot you or something. So the people who experience a bad event is really not affected by their emotional health. And I always describe that very simply. The incoming can't tell your emotional health. That thing's going to fall on you regardless of whether you're psychologically robust or not. But the important thing is, and And even the percent of individuals who have any of these symptoms, head injury, memory problems, dazed, confused, and right after it, that's pretty similar, depending upon whether you're at the bottom 10% or the upper 10%. But what's not different is the number of people who keep their symptoms. That is very different. If you start off in the bottom part of psychological fitness, you are way more likely to have memory problems, balance problems, ringing in your ears, etc., that get worse after the event and that have them weeks afterwards. So that sort of thing. So if you can get more people to be more psychologically robust, they are very likely to get better faster. Same thing. It's just the same story, just a different measurement. Oh, this was the composite GAT scores. This is the just emotional GAT scores. And interestingly, it isn't a fact that people are just unwilling to, I guess, ask for help, because although we hear all about stigma, it is true the people in the bottom were more willing to ask for help. I mean, you know, if you were in the bottom 10%, this is interested in receiving information for stress, emotional, alcohol concerns, you know, 13% versus 4.5%. So people, they at least have insight into they need something, which I was actually more encouraged by than I expected. And this one shows that healthcare utilization really is dependent upon your psychological health. These are the people that took their GAT before they went to the war. So if you had a low emotional fitness score before you went, then you are twice as likely to use healthcare while you're deployed as if you were in the 4 to 5 or 3 to 4 range. So when you're trying to sell the idea of doing psychological fitness training, the idea is it's a lot less expensive and a lot better for accomplishing the mission if you do this kind of training and you improve people's psychological health, and you will save money on healthcare costs. I'm not the first person to have thought that was true, but we are some of the first people who have measured it. And this is another thing, I suppose. Over the past, this is the depression and anxiety stuff. So over the last few days, have you been feeling depressed, hopeless, down, etc.? And once again, the people who say not at all have much higher scores than the people who say yeah nearly every day. So that's what you would expect. Those people who are already feeling who have less either emotional, family, social, or spiritual fitness are those who are endorsing symptoms of psychological unhealth. That seems likely. Now, all this doesn't matter at all unless there's something you can do to fix it. It's just unfortunate if you can't do something to fix it. Oh, that just shows that if you start off unpsychologically healthy, you're much more likely to get PTSD. That was shown by the Millennium Cohort study in 2009 already, so that we're just confirming what they found. So the important thing is that we did show that training actually changed stuff. And this is how we did it. So when we're making these master resilience trainers that you're going to send out and impart resilient skills to their soldiers, you could do it one of several ways. You could either just randomly distribute them across the Army, because you obviously can't get them everywhere at once. If you're making them 50 people at a time or 100 people at a time, and you got a 1,000,000-man army, you can't get somebody out there to every unit right away. So the way we did it was we did find 4 brigades, brigade combat teams, and we trained one master resilience trainer per each one of their companies, and then we compared them to 4 brigades we didn't give any to. And we followed them along through a deployment cycle and coming back and training, and they're very similar brigade combat teams. And here's what we found, that the units who had master resilience trainers, their soldiers, when they did their repeat assessment, showed improvement in these things. And the soldiers that were 18 to 24 showed improvement in all of these things. The people who were older, only in those, and the people who were younger showed between 2 and 6 times the magnitude of the improvement in those things. And for those people who worry about the dark side, I can tell you that nothing went down. So that's the first evidence we had that the training mattered. But it just mattered, but commanders, although they're happy if people are more optimistic, what did that mean, Rhonda? I got that next, I said, well, sir, here's what that meant. And then we took the people who we'd actually trained as master resilience trainers, and we compared them to guys who were the same age, the same rank, the same military occupational specialty, but had not gone through the master resilience trainer program. And we showed, well, here's what one thing it does is it shows that people who have a DODSR event, that's a Department of Defense suicide event registry, the people who went through the training were less likely to have one of those DODSR events. Nobody did, of the sample we looked at, nobody actually did commit suicide, but we did have some people who had some attempts and some ideation, and fewer if they had the training. And fewer had negative indisciplines, we'll call this group. An Article 15 is like non-judicial punishment, letter of reprimands, getting relieved, not getting promoted, et cetera. And once again, more people who did not have the training had these negative events than people who did. I will also tell you that of the people we did, if you look at our tech report, I think number 1 and 2, we showed that the people who were more psychologically fit did get promoted much faster, were more likely to get a command, and the people who were less psychologically fit were more likely to do any of the indisciplines that we measure, and we measure everything in the Army, and as well as not get promoted. And just in case, so if you measure it, if it matters, I just thought I'd point out that we have now done this every year. This is a fiscal year, so it started off in October of 2009, and so that's this year. We've done it every year, and we've measured between 630 and 930,000 people every year. The difference is because of the amount of people that are on active duty versus people who are mobilized from the Guard and Reserve. So apparently this year we didn't have so many people who had mobilized from the Guard and Reserve. So yeah, and that is the beauty, frankly, of our system. For that is you can make people do something, and then you don't have to worry about sampling error or that the people who liked it answered the questions because everybody did it. I can give you some information about family members. It's harder to motivate them, and which I'm supposed to be doing. And but I think we've almost got that one licked as well. You just have to incentivize them differently than soldiers. I think I'm done, and I'll be happy to try to answer any questions.
Thanks, Rhonda. You just mentioned at the end of your presentation incentivizing family members and partners to participate in the GAP as well. Could you shed some light on how that was actually done?
Yeah, and actually as I said, soldiers, we did not immediately feel the need to put in the physical stuff because we measure that very clearly in soldiers every year. But family members didn't have that necessarily. So what we did was the Army, and I won't say we because I'm not there any longer, but the Army partnered with Dr. Oz and Share Care, the people who did Real Age, and got all of their content subcontracted with them. And so we added, I talked about those slush questions. We needed those slush questions because we added a bunch of physical questions to the questionnaire. And now the person gets not just their psychological profile, but they get the physical profile as well to include all of the things they could do to improve their health. They have also, once again, it's a pretty robust virtual environment. And so they have gone to, because many of the soldiers and family members, particularly the young ones, are really engaged. We have online group meetings. They have organizations, whether it's by company, by battalion, by all the medics, whoever it is. They're competing against each other for can you improve the most, or it's the weight loss thing, or who's running the most, and so we've really gotten a lot of that kind of interaction, and the psychological stuff just comes along. We have some rewards for people who do it. We made whether it's the Fitbit or all the various kinds of physical monitoring systems people have, we now offer for free all that stuff that goes online so you can get the results back to yourself. I can have some suggestions. If you truly believe, as we truly believe, that more resilient parents would result in more resilient children because they would instill those skills before they turned up in my Army, which is what I'd really like to have happen. We could do something else. Then I would suggest that you could offer even lower rates on subsidized childcare for every 4 hours that you go to that your parent that the mother or father or both, even better, takes resilience training, that you get 50 cents off, let's say, every hour of childcare, which over a year is a lot. What they're doing in some other countries, I know about South Africa, for example, had a huge system where they give you a benefit to your health insurance premiums if you participate in this, because just like us, they found that if you participate in this sort of thing, your healthcare costs will go down. And so those are the kind of things that you can do to incentivize the people that are there to participate. And the other thing I would say, and we started teaching this to our spouses, particularly of deployed troops, because they have what's called family readiness groups, and once a month, you give free pizza and people come in, and instead of having just a bitch session, we started teaching one skill in each one of these things. And if you teach the ones where you get the immediate feedback that's positive, if you teach them active constructive responding, or you teach them about the gratitude journal, the things that actually make people feel better right away, they'll buy in and they'll come the next month when it's a little bit more difficult to learn. So those are the kind of things I would recommend that happen here in South Australia.
My name is Cheryl Warner. I was really interested in the slide that you had about post-traumatic stress disorder, and what did you actually measure growth? I think my question is very similar to the other lady. Post-traumatic growth in the population?
It took me several years to add any post-traumatic growth questions, and we haven't done any analysis of that yet. So I don't know the answer to that yet. There have been some really small studies done about that, but not in relation to whether people got training or not. Just how many people experience versus don't.
So I'm interested in your thoughts on how across a population of 1.3 million people, South Australia could look at somehow developing that sort of cohort of trainers on the sort of scale that you're talking about. Because it seems to me we'll need to move beyond schools and beyond workplaces. So I'm interested in your thoughts about that, and also interested in your thoughts about incentivising that as well.
Well, first of all, I would say if you put it in schools, you wouldn't need to move beyond schools. Everybody would get it. I mean, everybody goes to school, at least in South Australia, I think. But if you want to infuse it, here's the problem with that theory. And I will tell you that's a big, because what we did was, yes, we started it in basic training, but then in all the big units, we sent a master resilience trainer, and we got the first sergeants and the guys who were going to be supervisors, because what's the worst thing that can happen is one of these kids who gets all this stuff goes home and asks his father, how come you're not doing your gratitude journal? And he's going to beat you like a dog, you know? So you can't have the kid with some good idea that the parents haven't heard of. So I don't know whether you have like parent-teacher conferences that people have to go to. So I would probably want to instill the idea of what you're doing and why you're doing it into those kind of things before you tried to teach the kids and before the kids went home and talked about it. And that goes back to my original couple slides about the strategic communication plan and really a campaign plan for the entire organization. You have to talk, I mean, you've got government guys here, a few government guys here, but you got to get like, you know, the governor or whatever he is. I mean, you just have to think about those things. You can't have the subordinate people with knowledge and stuff that threatens the other guys, or it will never be successful. And like I said, the parent-teacher conferences so that the students could get it from the teachers and that the parents wouldn't feel threatened. If I were going to put it into your healthcare system, and by the way, we have got some really interesting data about the people who have psychological symptoms, have, at least in some orthopedic operations, have about 25% the likelihood of being helped by a particular operation than people who don't have a psychological symptom complex. And so my orthopedic buddies, and those guys are not touchy-feely in any way, have suggested that, well, Rhonda, should I be doing resilience training before I operate? Because if I know the guy is not going to get better, why would I do this operation?
Can you tell us a little bit, just quickly, Rhonda, about how much training was involved with the sergeants for Master Resilience Training?
Right, for our Master Resilience trainers, it's a 2-week program. For the first 5 days, we teach them all the skills. And then the 5 days the following week, we teach them how to instill them. So we teach them, we sort of practice training. and we do give them a test at the end. So that's, however many hours that is. Then when they go back, we instituted a requirement. It was an interesting thing. When we did the big evaluation with all those brigades, the first year we really saw no difference. And then we published what we call the training guidance. And that says that you must do resilience training 27 hours a year for every soldier if you have a master resilience trainer in your organization. And magically, that was when we saw the difference. So you have to, because they can know it, and those master resilience trainers knew it, and they were using it at home, and their commanders weren't told that they had to give them time to train it, and so they didn't. And once they were mandated, and like I said, doers do what checkers check. So once the commanders then had to go back and show on their training calendars how many hours and when they were doing resilience training, magically those master resilience trainers had an opportunity to train. And that's when we saw the difference in the outcome of the people. So you can't just leave it. Then you'll be like I was before I learned all this stuff. I may have all those skills, and then I just have them, and I know them, and I'm really lucky, but I don't give them to anybody. I missed the pay it forward part till after I started doing this job.
Just for the non-touchy-feely bean counters, have you done an assessment of the costs versus benefits of the program?
Not yet, but I feel very confident that's happening as we speak. I do know that, I really thought I had that slide in there, so I don't know why I didn't. We just did the analysis showing, we always do a post-deployment health assessment, and we still do a post-deployment reassessment, which happens 90 days after they come back. We did show there was half as much substance abuse on that 90-day for the people that had the training. So I can tell you how expensive that is. And once again, it was half. It was a small amount. So in that first 90 days, we had, I think we made 2.5% were diagnosed in the non-trained group and 1.2%. But once again, when you're deploying, 500,000 people, that's a lot of individuals who didn't have a substance abuse problem. And that's in, by the way, that is in technical report number 4 of the Comprehensive Soldier Fitness. If you want to read 50 pages in that last 30 seconds I just talked about, that's it.
Say that more slowly. Technical report number 4.
Technical report number 4. We did tech report for CSF. Like I said, we didn't do this as a research project. So it wasn't going to be eligible for a peer-reviewed journal because we didn't have, an IRB study and stuff. We did this as data-driven decision-making. But we did use, very scientific methods to analyze what the results were, and we published them in what are called technical report number 1, 2, 3, and 4. So tech report number 1 was when we showed really the effect of psychological health on negative outcomes. And tech report number 2 was where we showed the effect of psychological health on positive outcomes. And number 3 was when we looked at, we reported on this evaluation of all the brigades and what improved and what didn't. And then 4 is some of those other outcomes like the people who got training versus didn't, and on their post-deployment results. And those are available on the web.
Kathy, I'm curious as someone who's new to this. We're talking about the measurement of that, but is there some reference we can look at in terms of content, of what you actually taught? Or is that all confidential?
I think that is also in those reports. And now that not the exact specific content is not, it probably is. There's a lot of discussion about contracting and intellectual property and that sort of thing.
But it includes things like?
It includes all the stuff that's in the Penn Resilience Program, only adapted for adults and a different vocabulary. So if it was the Army that used Hunt the Good Stuff instead of the Gratitude Journal, for example. We use different examples and different, it says soldier a lot in ours, and it doesn't say it doesn't say that in the Penn Resilience Program.
Hi, my name's Andrew.
Hi.
I'm just asking a question about how you make a decision of what to drop to make room for resilience training. Asking from the perspective of schools, what on the national curriculum will we drop to make room for wellbeing?
Well, here's what I told the guys in the Army. You drop whatever you haven't measured as effective. And there were like 500 hours they could have dropped. But there was this whole superstructure of people who were emotionally wedded to that stuff, and they didn't care if it had been demonstrated to be effective. So, so you have to go back and look and see, so what is it we're doing that really doesn't matter? But I can't tell you that.
You showed us a graph that at the starting point, all the divisions and brigades and so forth were the same. We heard yesterday about the invisible hand and how sort of a competition can actually enhance the impact. Is there any way to enhance the program in the Army, and are there any sort of references for us in terms of implementation?
Well, I would say we had exactly what was described. We had commanders who embraced this and realized that, that they could do something different than was being done. So for example, in Korea, which is really a hotbed of disaster, we take all these young people who have never been anyplace else in their lives, they go to basic training for 9 weeks, and then they're deployed to Korea for a year. They don't have their families, it's their first assignment, so they really haven't necessarily internalized all the Army ethos and stuff. And so the one commander there, he put all his master resilience trainers in the in-processing section, so every incoming private got his 20 hours of resilience training right away before he got sent off into the wilderness, and showed that the indiscipline rate went dramatically down. And it isn't like Korea all of a sudden got really wholesome, because all the guys who didn't get the training continued to get worse. And so that guy then came back to the States, and he's now in charge of, he's the G357, who's in charge of all the operations and training for the Army. So yes, there's opportunities to then take what's required and expand on it and measure it yourself, because people are kind of, once you see a little bit of benefit, then you see, well, how can I make it better?